Thank you, Simon. Perfect. You were right. Oh, today the message is a life of devotion. And when I came up with that title, I knew it was important, but it's been interesting to work with that whole idea of what is a life of devotion? What does that look like? Devotion, the word itself means love, loyalty, and an enthusiasm for something greater than yourself. Devotion. It's about it's about faith. The beginning that were the women that began in medieval times and continued until the 20th century believed that life was for them the via apostolica, which is the path of the disciple, the way of the apostle. It was seeing your spiritual life as so woven into who you are and what each day brings that they're not separate at all. They prayed, they sat in silence, they would dance and sing as part of their services. They healed, they taught, they did illuminated manuscripts to get spiritual teachings out to more people. They cared for the outcast, and yet they were successful financially. They believed that if they were going to live this life of the apostles and do the work that they were sent to do, that they weren't going to feel guilty about creating the resources with which to do it. So they were far ahead of their times and did that, though, that all of their fundraising was done out of a life of devotion. Nothing selfish, but rather trying to live that path that the man Jesus and the Christian tradition invited them and all of us to do. When I was looking at the title, A Life of Devotion, I immediately thought of Wendy, the way she would go sit and write prayers every single time she came into the building and would leave prayers in the prayer box. As she would come early and listen to the music and enjoy that, coming to classes. And I realized that a life of devotion, you don't have to be the traditional high holy person. In fact, those are rare. The life of devotion is simply something we are all called to do. And it's walking and befriending the presence of the divine in big ways and in little ways in your everyday life. The chakra for this month is that of the throat and of willpower. It's of aligning your life energies, your words, your actions, your thoughts, and seeking to align them with the presence of the divine, your will with God's will, which was one of Jesus's great prayers in the Garden of Gethsemane. Not my will, but thine. Let me move out of ego and into a higher understanding of what my whole life is about, what being in the presence of the world is about. The Kabbalah is Hesed and Gevurah, which is compassion and strength. And to live a life of devotion, compassion and strength are essential. Strength of focus, strength of purpose, but compassion, speaking the truth with love, holding yourself in compassion as well as others. We are living in very wild times. We have the pandemic and also pandemic exhaustion. People are really sharing more and more. And David showed a darling video of a kid that just went, I'm just done. I'm done with this. I can't go get ice cream. I can't go to the playground at McDonald's. And watching her, there are so many things that we're really acutely missing. And we knew there was going to be a period where there were shutdowns, But this has been far more extended than we ever could have dreamed of, and it's causing us to shift into a place where we're really having to let go of how things were and who we were in a lot of ways, finding new ways to connect, to be present, to express. We've got fires and hurricanes, and we send our blessings this day to all the people and the animals and the natural world that is being impacted by the global warming and all of the effects it's having on our climate, on our lives. We're seeing day after day more calls for racial justice and for equality of all of God's people, which is what our originating documents for our country stated. Liberty for all, the right to pursue happiness for all. The economic basis that we've kind of built our lives on is changed dramatically. There are many people who are experiencing challenges, and the difference between the top percent and all the rest is something we're becoming more and more aware of. We're facing the most polarized election that I can remember in my lifetime, and I remember the 60s. And so amid all of these things that are going on, it's no wonder that we're tired. It's no wonder that we're having to revision who we are collectively as well as individually. And I believe with all of my heart that this is a portal for us to release old patterns that no longer serve us so that new ways of being can be given birth to. We're in the throes of a huge time of shift and change. And so how do we live in this world of such different changes we never could have anticipated? And the life of devotion is the one that will show you the way through, because it's the path that helps you stay linked to the presence of God, to the presence of the divine, whatever name you may call it. It helps link you to the divine, but also to the world, because a path of devotion is not just to be devoted to God, it's to be devoted to be the presence of God and have yourself be in service to that divine presence. It's seeing everything as sacred. In the Wisdom Jesus, which we're studying on Thursday, Cynthia Bourgeault had some interesting pieces that I want to share with you that we discussed this last week that tie in beautifully. And she said, life is not about good behavior so that you'll make it through the final judgment, all right? It's not a finishing school where you're trying to polish off and be better. It's not a sweatshop where you're working off old karmas. Rather, she said, we are living in a time to become literally and figuratively and physically aware of this presence of the divine right as we are and who we are. She writes this: we are in this process of speaking into being the revelation of God's most hidden and intimate name. Our time here is not to focus on how quickly we can get back to our spiritual homeland, but rather to give ourselves fully to the divine intimacy being ventured right here and right now. We're doing it here and now through the marrow of our human lives, consciously lived. Human lives consciously lived. One of the things that she said is Jesus's greatest challenge was not the crucifixion. That was one experience. It was actually being incarnated and experiencing the world completely and totally like we do. For years, they've discussed, theologians, was he a normal physical human body? Was he part body, part spirit? What it's been trying to figure out. And it's frequently called the mystery of the incarnation. And what does this God taking physical form mean? And realizing that God takes physical form in all of us. We are all the presence of the divine. And so when I see the word, the mystery of incarnation, the student of theology and divinity thinks, oh, that's about Jesus. But one of the things that really struck me was I saw the mystery of the incarnation, and I thought, that is all of us. We are living in the midst of the mystery of being incarnated, being in this world. What are we meant to say? What are we meant to do? What difference can we make? And one of the things that she talks about in the chapter is not only the idea of the power of incarnation, and that Christianity is actually a religion of incarnation. It's being profoundly present, seeing God everywhere. And it's also seeing life as sacred, as a sacrament. And a sacrament traditionally is an outward or visible symbol of an inward and spiritual grace. A sacrament, we do sacraments with the bread and the wine when we do communion, but sacrament is not meant to be just done in a religious setting during a high holy service. The Wisdom Jesus, she says, a sacrament does not merely symbolize a spiritual reality, it lives that reality into existence. So we take the symbol, but then it's, what do we do with that symbol, that outward sign? For me, seeing that butterfly and feeling Wendy's energy, that was an outward sign of an inward grace of Wendy's continued love and presence, and that we truly are eternal spiritual beings. Jesus's life was filled with mystery and with sacraments. It's the energy and the path that he seeks to show us how we can walk a life of devotion day by day in the midst of the world, to realize that presence of the divine. And to realize has two meanings as well, just as the true, I think, meaning of sacrament. To realize is to recognize something, but to realize is to also make it real through you. You realize your potential. You realize the presence of God and live your own potential, bringing that divine out. Love calls forth that which is within to express into the world. And one of the things I found so important is to really think and realize it's not necessarily the big things, it's the little things. It's the power of little things. Living a life of devotion is not sitting in silent prayer alone the way we frequently vision it. It is stepping into the world and seeing the divine and knowing we are part of activating and empowering that link. She says Jesus is the bridge between the realms, the seen and the unseen. Jesus is the example of how we can walk this path that links us to the divine no matter what is going on. We talked about the little things. Mother Teresa's famous saying is, it's not about doing great things, it's about doing little things with great love. It's about becoming more aware of the little things. And we talked about different things that struck us as just magical in the presence of the divine. Beverly talked about the way her bunny's nose moves back and forth, and that she looks at that and it brings her joy, and it's the divine. I remembered walking on North Beach and walking in and amid all of the stones that were on the beach, one caught my attention. And as I reached to pick it up and the sand moved to the side a bit, I realized it was a heart shape. And it was like, don't you love it when you find a heart-shaped rock? There's just something magical about it. And it's that presence of love, of the divine. And then I took it to the water and I put it in the water, and that kind of rough stone started to shimmer and the colors within it shone. And so it's that small thing of walking along the beach, and instead of just walking and ignoring what's there, it's paying attention. And then up, noticing life. It may be that you queue out and you run into somebody that you haven't seen for a while. That's one of those heartstone moments. And then, having realized, the presence is here, how do you realize it as an expression of you? By taking that stone to the water was my way of saying, I'm going to behold the hidden beauty that is in this rough-looking stone. And we do that for one another. When we do acts of kindness, when we hold each other in prayer, when we hug each other back in the day when we could do that, and when we will do it once again. And so we co-create with the divine. Cynthia says, it is the fully realized and revealed mystery of human life lived as a conscious sacrament. Here is how we get there. The secret that Jesus will unfold for us through the course of his own consciously sacramental life. But our first step in joining him on this journey is to recognize that his incarnation is not about fall, guilt, or blame, but about goodness, solidarity, and our own intimate participation in the mysteries of love at the heart of all of creation. It is a life of devotion. It is consciously sacramental. It is the way through being embodied and present in the world, but with an understanding that transcends the outer appearances of this world. Toward the end of our class on Thursday, Beverly came up with a wonderful idea that I'm going to invite you all to join us in. We're going to have a place on the website that is going to be a collective prayer of recognizing the presence of God in little things as we live lives of devotion. Spirit is calling. They must have an idea. And so what we're going to invite you to do is just fill in the following line, and we're going to have a collective prayer of divine presence and where we see it in big and small ways. And that is, I saw God in, and then fill in the blank. I saw God in. Okay. One of the downsides of doing this from home, okay, I saw God in my prescription being filled. So join us. Notice things. As the air clears and the sky gets blue again, notice it. Notice the people in your life. Notice the things around you. Look at the candle you may have lit. And just email to info@unitypt.org your line or lines, and I saw God today in, and then we'll get a whole list, and then we'll all be able to share how living a life of devotion is not only individual, but it's also communal. And it can be great fun. So I saw God in. Come join us. So let us pray for a moment. Sweet, sweet Spirit. Oh, we are so willing to find a path of grace and compassion and love and peace and wisdom in the midst of our current world, both individually and collectively. And so we renew, rededicate, and restore ourselves to this path of devotion, of seeing the sacred, of seeing and being sacraments and sanctuaries. Let us dive deep into the mystery of our own incarnations so that we may, more than ever before, see and feel and know and be that presence of the divine. And so it is, Om, Amen, and blessed be.